is a revolutionary act. Welcome to the Objective Podcast with your host, Jay. Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk Headline series. I'm your host, Jay, and this is the Objective Podcast. I want to thank you for tuning in to the 17th episode of the Let's Talk Headline series. Today's episode, we have a special report focusing solely on the Russia investigation, with all of the developments happening, including special counsel Robert Mueller actually, making a press appearance. We're going to break that down. We're going to discuss that. In this episode, I will be referring to Greg Jarrett. Greg Jarrett is the author of The Russia Hoax. And one thing that I appreciate about Greg Jarrett and why I feel comfortable using Greg Jarrett as a source is because in his work, he refers to things that are in the public realm. These are not conspiracy theories. These are things that have been published, things that are common knowledge. He just so puts it in such a manner and in such a way and organizes these facts in such a way that paints a very important picture when looking at the Russia investigation on a whole. One of the other sources I will be using, and I will be playing some of her content, sort of like a commercial break throughout the duration of this show, is the former federal prosecutor Sidney Powell. She was a guest on an interview by the Epoch Times. I believe it's, I actually just recently subscribed to their channel on YouTube. What do they call it? Thought Leaders. I don't know if it's a segment of the show, but basically after hearing and watching that interview, I, thought it would be great to subscribe because I'd love to see more of their content. Not only that, I also purchased Sidney Powell's book called A License to Lie. I should be getting that on Tuesday. I'm recording this on Sunday, June the 2nd, and we're going to break away here for a second just to give props to the Toronto Raptors, the first Canadian team to make it to the NBA Finals. This is huge. I was actually born in Toronto, and I've been a Toronto fan for the longest time. There have been some quiet times when I've been very disappointed in how the team has performed. And I was really wondering and curious about the thought process in some of the people that the Toronto Raptors were drafting, but it looks like it has all paid off and they've come a long way. I don't know if you folks are basketball fans, but this is huge, especially for Canadians. So this is game 2 we're going into tonight. Actually, it's going to be recorded tonight, and I'm going to watch it after I record this. But if you guys are basketball fans, let me know how you guys feel about Toronto being in the finals against Golden State, an elite team. But this is not a sports podcast, not in the slightest. I just wanted to plug that for a second. Guys, if you don't follow me on Instagram, be sure to follow me at The Objective Podcast, and that's on Instagram. You will notice that I don't post much on my feed, but I constantly post stories, essentially, whether it be stuff about my motorcycle, stuff about, sometimes I post screenshots of current news events from news websites just to keep my followers up to date and some of the stories that I'm paying attention to and that I want you to also pay attention to. So again, that's at The Objective Podcast. Guys, if you do not follow, or if you do not visit, or if you have never visited www.politicalstorm.com, I implore you to definitely open up a new browser right now and hit that www.politicalstorm.com. Check out the website. There's a bunch of great contributors. I am honored to be one of those contributors, and my content is on that website, as well as a lot of great content creators. And if you're on Facebook as well, they do have a Facebook page that you should follow and like and share the content, support independent media. As most of you know, if you've been paying attention to the news cycle, former special counsel to the Russia investigation made a very rare appearance. Now, we know for the last 2 years, Mueller has been sort of a shadowy figure. You don't see a lot of him in front of the cameras, and I think that's a great thing. I think that's a professional thing, especially when you are dealing with a investigation of such a high profile and where public interest is at its peak. You don't want to muddy your investigation by making appearances and responding to every little discrepancy that either the media puts out or that other politicians are stating. Whenever the special counsel would respond, it would be coming from his office. It wouldn't be coming directly from his mouth. So I think that was a tactical and a tactful strategy and a decision on behalf of Robert Mueller. But now that the 448 pages of the report are out to the public, Robert Mueller, he made a very strange appearance to the media. And it seems that he created more questions than answers in this statement. One of the biggest issues that we're seeing here today, and one of the reasons why I believe that Mueller should be subpoenaed or invited to testify before Congress, is because there is a discrepancy in what he has said and then what the Attorney General Barr has stated after their conversation regarding the report. We're going to refer here to Greg Jarrett's article on Fox News. It's entitled "The Two Faces of Robert Mueller and Trump's Presumption of Guilt." As of the date of recording this podcast, this was published 4 days ago. If you guys can actually open that article up, just type it in Google. So I'm going to read this first paragraph, and I'm going to read you A.G. Barr's direct words verbatim as published in this article. So, in his final act before resigning his position, Mueller told the gathered media on Wednesday that his non-decision decision, keep that in mind, on whether the president obstructed justice was informed by a long-standing opinion by the Office of Legal Counsel. That is the infamous OLC that we all hear about regularly at the Justice Department, that a sitting president cannot be charged with a crime. But according to William Barr, that's not what Mueller told the Attorney General and others during a meeting on March 5th, 2017. I want you to keep that in mind, the Attorney General and others, meaning that there were others present when they had a discussion. Here's what Barr told senators during his May 1st testimony. These are quotes, A.G. Barr. "We were frankly surprised that they were not going to reach a decision on obstruction, and we asked them a lot about the reasoning behind this. Mueller stated how many times? 3 times to us in that meeting in response to our questions that he emphatically was not saying that but for the OLC opinion, he would have found obstruction." Now, let's break this down, folks. The OLC is the Office of Legal Counsel, and the Office of Legal Counsel acts sort of like a referee for legal matters within the executive branch. So there has been, this is true, there has been a long-standing policy that the president cannot be indicted. So it makes you ask the question, right? If this was in fact a long-standing policy that was set in place prior to the special counsel investigation, then what was the point of the investigation? Someone needs to tell me that. What was the point? If this whole thing was predicated, the whole fact that a sitting president cannot be indicted, then someone needs to tell me what was the purpose of the $40 million. The copious amounts of resources. What exactly was the point of all of this? Was it political theater? Fortune.com, in an article, they say the policy blocking indicting a sitting president dates back to the presidency of Richard Nixon. In September 1973, just under a year before Nixon resigned, the DOJ's Office of Legal Counsel determined that a criminal case against the president would interfere with the president's unique official duties. most of which cannot be performed by anyone else. Therefore, impeachment is the only manner by which a sitting president can be penalized for wrongdoing. That makes me think that there was a criminal investigation, not for the purpose of coming to a criminal conclusion, but for the purpose of coming to a political one. Let's run that back. There was a criminal investigation into the president, an arbitrary one, only because the end goal was never going to be criminal. It was always going to be political. The goal has always been impeachment. And in order to impeach, the Democrats needed a reason to justify impeachment. Crazy. Barr continues to say, we specifically asked him, that's Mueller, about the OLC opinion and whether or not he was taking a position that he would have found a crime, but for the existence of the OLC opinion. And he made it very clear several times that this was not his position. So essentially what they're saying is they were confirming with him in this meeting. Now, you can only have one person telling the truth. It's either AG Barr or it's Robert Mueller. Only one, and I don't care who you think is or who isn't, but you have to follow the facts. So they're saying in this meeting, they made sure that it wasn't for the OLC opinion that a sitting president cannot be indicted, that he did not come to a decision. So he's like, hey, Mueller, why did you not come to a decision about President Trump being indicted, or you charging with obstruction or whatever charges you have laid against him? Why is that? Was it because the OLC says that no sitting president can be indicted? Is that why? And according to Barr, Mueller said, no, that's not the reason why. We're going to cut to a break here. We're going to go to the interview. I'll play you guys a segment, the interview with Sidney Powell. Sidney Powell on the Epoch Times. I'll be right back with you in a moment. Don't go anywhere, folks.
Here you have Hillary Clinton literally destroying evidence, bleach bidding her computer, and setting fire to the server at her house or something. And that is obstruction of justice. That is destruction of evidence. But somebody saying stand strong is not obstruction of justice. Yet that was one of the things listed in their Mueller report as a potentially obstructive act. You know, most Americans just want the truth, whatever it is, the unvarnished truth. Let the chips fall where they may, fire the people that need to be fired, hold them accountable, and let's start over. But until we know exactly what happened and who's responsible for it, no one in this country can have any faith or trust in the Department of Justice or the FBI. And these are two of what should be the most stellar institutions in the country. I love the Department of Justice and the FBI. I wrote that book. Even the judges I criticize, I love those judges. And that's why I wrote it. Because if you care about something, you want to make it better, and you want it to be the best it can possibly be. It can't be that way if it's not honest.
Welcome back to the second segment, folks. In the previous segment, we discussed the OLC and how there is a discrepancy between AG Barr and former special counsel Robert Mueller. In this segment, we're going to talk about the presumption of innocence. Guilty until proven innocent. Doesn't that sound strange? You are considered guilty until you can prove yourself innocent. How bizarre is that? I just want to read a segment here from that article that I referred to by Greg Jarrett. He says, Mueller did not abandon the OLC opinion in this case because he surely knew the facts and evidence did not support the law of obstruction. Instead, in his 448-page report, he implied presidential obstruction in a remarkable achievement in creative writing. He set forth in luxurious detail evidence, quote unquote, on both sides of the question. But this is not the job of any chief prosecutor anywhere. He says here, Mueller's actions were not only noxious, but patently unfair to Trump. The special counsel publicly besmirched the president with tales of suspicious behavior instead of stating evidence that rose to a level of criminality. That right there, folks, is so important, because all we're hearing is insinuation. All we're hearing is suspicion. All we're hearing is conspiracy theory. Not once have we seen evidence that rises. Now listen to this. I'm not saying that we have not seen evidence. There are people who are giving circumstantial evidence, fine and fair, but we have not yet seen evidence that has risen to the level of criminality, and that is what matters in the rule of law. Guilty until proven innocent. Folks, Democrats are sacrificing the basic precept of the American justice system all to impeach Trump. When you're arrested, when you're charged with a crime, you are considered innocent until proven guilty in the court of law. Michael Avenatti, as much as I don't like the guy, he is considered innocent until proven guilty in the court of law by the use of evidence and fact patterns. So I want to ask you a question. I want to ask you, and ask yourself this question. And this is the only question that matters here. The question is, was President Trump proven guilty? And this all, what you're going to realize is this all falls upon this whole OLC opinion. Did Mueller just find out about the OLC opinion after he started the investigation? No. So that's why I believe there needs to be a congressional hearing where Mueller is asked serious questions, because it's not that he can just come up to the press and make a statement and mic drop and go back to private life. This is something worthy of investment. There's huge public interest in this investigation. How ridiculous do Democrats look? Like Nancy Pelosi when she says that President Trump is involved in a cover-up. You're telling me after that scope of an investigation by the elite law enforcement agency, the president is still involved in a cover-up? Now, I've heard some conspiracy theories, but these Democrats are going off the deep end. A few fries short of a Happy Meal. After all the covers have been removed, you're going to insinuate that the president is involved in some deep cover-up. There needs to be a time where you say, okay, we were wrong. Let's move on. Let's work together. Get things done as a country. But remember, who is that Senator Green, who he actually introduced articles of impeachment very early, even before this investigation was anywhere near to being done. And why did he do so? Because he didn't like Trump. And those articles and that attempt failed terribly. But it just goes to show how the Democrats, they are not looking for evidence to support impeachment. They're looking at impeachment and they're trying to cherry pick things and trying to justify and bend the truth in order to fit in the parameters of their narrative. So on that note, folks, listen here to a short segment of some Sidney Powell in that interview with the Epoch Times. We will be right back in a second. Do not go anywhere.
Well, Congress has 98.5% of the report unredacted, which is the most transparent anybody has ever been with a report like this. All the Attorney General had to say was the conclusions of it. So we have not only the most transparent president in history who produced 1.4 million documents and waived executive privilege and waived attorney-client privilege so that everything and everybody could testify for how many hours Mr. Mueller and his team wanted it, hundreds of hours of testimony. And then Attorney General Barr, literally all he had to say was there's no validity to no charges are being brought. That's all he owed to the American people or Congress. Instead, he produced the whole report in the interest of transparency, except the grand jury material that he's legally required to protect or anything that might be classified for some reason.
You know, as you're speaking, it just strikes me, all this it strikes me as always being, leaving a little bit of ambiguity or some sort of question to latch on to, something that you're not clear. A cloud. That's interesting. I mean,
They've done that to Mr. Trump from the beginning. From the time he rode down the escalator, they have tried to create a cloud over and around him.
The Mueller press conference, in terms of unprecedented FBI or DOJ announcements, it's been compared to Comey's complete exoneration of Hillary Clinton. Where do you feel it stands?
I think that's a good analogy. It's everything a prosecutor should not do. There's either evidence to bring charges and you bring charges, or you just decline prosecution. But you don't go out and put the burden of proof on the defendant to prove he's innocent and smear him with scads of facts and allegations. He did exactly the same thing Comey did, except even worse, because he did it against the President of the United States and in a report with 250 pages of innuendo and suggestions.
Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final segment of this episode. I know this episode's a bit longer than anticipated, but this is a special report. This is a very important issue, and I will not allow it to be swept under the rug. If you have waited this long, if you have been here from the beginning, wow, thank you. I wonder if I would listen to myself for that long. But if you do, please do like that or hit that like button if you're watching on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube as well. There's a quote that I came up with as I was doing a little bit of reading for this show. And that quote is, "Ambiguity is deception's first love and justice's worst enemy." Yes, I made that up, okay? I may not be the shiniest tool in the tool shed, but I have my moments. Now, I remember there was a time when I used to write essays when I was younger, and I'd get it graded and get like an A+, A-, and I'd bring it home to my mom. My mom would read it, and she would look at me like, "Did you read that? Did you write this?" I didn't know if I should have been happy or offended or insulted that, I was being underestimated. But you know what? Every now and again, I have my moments. Let's go with that quote again. "Ambiguity is deception's first love and justice's worst enemy." In order for justice to be executed in a fashion that is credible, in a fashion that is favored, you need to have decisiveness. You need to have clarity. You need to have credibility. Ambiguity and justice do not go along. Ambiguity and deception go hand in hand. Because when you have a vague cloud of confusion and vagueness, you are able to insert into that cloud what you want to be seen. Ambiguity and the lack of clarity is pivotal in order for deception to do its work, in order for deceit and lies and fallacy to do its work. And what I realized from Mueller's statement is that not only his statement, but his report, although it was 448 pages, it was fluff. And what further makes me come to that conclusion is that his inability to take questions from the press shows the delicacy and the frailty of his work. The Democrats' lackluster attempts to have Mueller testify and answer questions that would remove this veil of ambiguity shows the purpose of his work. And again, I'll say the purpose of his work based on my study of this topic. It was political theater, all to act as a launch pad for impeachment. Folks, it is the prosecutor's job to make a decision. Not only to make a decision, because we see in the Jussie Smollett debacle, Kim Foxx made a decision. It's not only to make a decision, but it's to make a decision within the parameters of the written law. It is not the prosecutor's job to make a no decision, as Jarrett puts it. I mean, the mere fact that Bob Mueller does not choose to proceed with charges, yet continues to imply criminality on the basis of circumstantial evidence, shows that his purpose was to undermine the presidency rather than find the truth. Greg Jarrett actually has an example. He says in his article, let's say you deposited your paycheck at the bank on Monday, the same day it's robbed. The prosecutor then announces publicly that he cannot prove you didn't rob the bank, so you are neither criminally accused nor exonerated. I know that scale is unlikely, but the principle behind the example is very relevant. He says the burden of proof has now been shifted to you to disprove a negative. How would you feel? You've been maligned with the taint of criminality and no longer enjoy the presumption of innocence. He continues to say this is the equivalent of what Mueller did to Trump. The special counsel created the impression that Trump might have engaged in wrongdoing because he could not prove otherwise. Oh my goodness, I love this man, Greg Jarrett. I love you. Let's read that again. This is the equivalent of what Mueller did to Trump. The special counsel created the impression that Trump might have engaged in wrongdoing because he could not prove otherwise. If this is not a political hit job, I don't know what is. And the interesting thing is that although the OLC policy states that the president cannot be indicted, Barr states that Mueller could have reached a conclusion. The mere fact that he did not reach a conclusion shows that this was a political stunt. He could have said, based on the evidence that we have obtained during this 2-year investigation, it is in my opinion that President Trump could be indicted or could be charged with obstruction of justice. But due to the OLC's long-standing policy that a president cannot be indicted, we obviously will not be proceeding with charges. He could have done something like that. But he literally made no decision, because when you make a decision, when he says, based on the evidence that we have, President Trump could have been charged with obstruction, the onus is on you to provide the evidence as to why Trump's action reaches the threshold of criminal behavior. But by being ambiguous, you're able to insinuate, you're able to besmirch, you're able to politicize this entire system, this entire investigation. Because if he stated that Trump could have been indicted, the report would need to legally prove this. He would need to articulate what section of the United States Criminal Code would support a charge, which there is none. If he stated that Trump could not have been indicted, the anti-Trump establishment's narrative would be absolutely obliterated and in effect prove that Trump was in fact a victim to a witch hunt. Folks, we are living in an incredible time. And it is our responsibility to live with our eyes and our ears wide open. Enough of being a consumer, enough of being told how to think. Let's look at the facts. Now, I don't mean those regurgitated facts. I mean, we need to go to the source. You need to buy yourself a criminal code. You need to read those sections. You need to read that 448-page report. You need to look at all the congressional hearings, even though they're 6 hours long. Listen to them on the way to work, on the way back, while preparing dinner. Because at the end of the day, it is our justice system and the integrity of that justice system that needs to work for us. If you're willing to turn the judicial system on its head for one man, You are setting a precedent that endangers not only you, but your family and those that you love. Thank you so much for tuning in to the 17th episode of the Let's Talk Headlines series. This was a special report on the Russia investigation brought to you by your host, Jay. Remember the quote, ambiguity is deception's first love and justice's worst enemy. Make it your goal to be objective. Have a good night.